Hey guys, welcome. First of all, a belated Merry Christmas to you all. Hope you all had or having a great holiday with your families. Stayed away from Star Citizen for a few days and enjoyed the beauty of real life. Wait a second, Star Citizen is the real life, right? Alright, now let's get to it. Today we're going to do the part 3 of Alpha 4.5 weapons test, and we're going to be testing the distortion weapons. We will test and compare the size 3 distortion cannons, the size 3 distortion repeaters, as well as the size 4 distortion scatterguns. In Star Citizen, we have 3 types of distortion weapons. First are the distortion cannons, second, distortion repeaters, and third, distortion scatterguns. For the distortion cannons, we have 2 types. One is called the sucker punch cannon. For the sucker punch cannon, we have from size 1 to size 3. And the manufacturer is called Joker Engineering. The size 1 sucker punch cannon is simply called sucker punch cannon. The size 2 is called sucker punch L cannon. The size 3 is called sucker punch XL cannon. And in today's video, we're going to be testing only the sucker punch XL cannon. The second type of the distortion cannon is called the EVSD cannons, and this is the bespoke cannon for the vanguards. So all 3 types of vanguards can be equipped with this cannon, and this is a size 2 distortion cannon. This is not the stock weapon on any of the vanguard, especially the vanguard sentinels. But you can purchase this cannon in-game and equipped on any of the vanguard. I will be testing this cannon in a separate video. Now, for the distortion repeaters, we also have 2 types that are currently in-game. One is the DR Model XJ repeaters. For this one, we have from size 1 to size 3. The size 1 is called the DR Model XJ1, size 2 is called the XJ2, size 3 is called the XJ3 repeater. And the manufacturer for these repeaters is the ASD, the Associated Science and Development. And we will be testing the DR Model XJ3 repeater in this video. The second type of the distortion repeater is called the ATVS repeater. This is the size 2 bespoke repeater for the vanguards. And this is also the stock repeaters for the Vanguard Sentinel. And we will also be testing this in a separate video. Now, for the distortion scatterguns, we have 3 types, but only 2 types that is useful in-game. One is the size 4 Salvation Distortion Scattergun, and the other is the size 5 Absolution Distortion Scattergun. The other is the size 6 Condemnation Distortion Scattergun, but there is no any of the flyable ships that can equip the size 6 weapon. And if I remember correctly, these 2 weapons can only be looted from the contested zone, the Hangar 30 in Checkmate. However, there is another way to get the size 4 Salvation Distortion Scattergun, and that is by pledging a 325A. If you do have a pledged 325A in-game, if you use the customization option, if you go to packages, one of the weapon package will include one size 4 Salvation Distortion Scattergun. So this is what I am able to keep a size 4 Salvation Distortion Scattergun, because I have looted a lot of these weapons from the contested zone in the previous patches, but in this patch, all my weapons got wiped. But as long as I can have one of this weapon, I can always multiply it. And by the way, except these distortion scatterguns, all the distortion cannons as well as the distortion repeaters can be purchased in-game. And now let's compare these 3 weapons. The burst DPS for the Sucker Punch XL is 304, XJ3 is 338. For the Salvation is 480. So the distortion scattergun has the highest burst DPS, and the Sucker Punch XL has the smallest DPS. The alpha damage for the Salvation is also the highest, 480. For the XJ3 is the lowest, 58. For the Sucker Punch XL, 183. Rounds per minute, however, the Distortion Scattergun has the lowest, 60. The Distortion Cannon, 100. And the Distortion Repeater has the highest, 350. But the speed for the Distortion Scattergun is the slowest, 700 meters per second. For both the Sucker Punch XL and the XA3, 1300 meters per second. And the range for both of them is 2.6 kilometers. However, for the Distortion Scattergun is only 1.4 kilometers. The Distortion Scattergun is only effective in close range, within 300 to 400 meters. Also because this is a scattergun, so the bullet spread is really high. You need to get close in order to be more effective. One of the most important factor for the distortion weapons is the explosion radius. This, during the PTU, has been removed, which will render the distortion weapon very ineffective. However, in the 4.5 Live, this value has been added back, which makes the distortion weapon very effective again. So in the future patches, I believe this value will also change in order to bring distortion weapons to a proper balance. Now, the explosion radius for both the distortion cannon as well as the distortion repeater, 20 to 30 meters. And for the distortion scattergun, it's 20 to 25 meters. Now, in terms of the ammo penetration and the near and far radius, the base penetration for the distortion cannon is 3.15 meters. For the repeater is 1.05, and for the scattergun is 1.12. So among all these weapons, the distortion cannon has the best penetration value, including the near and far radius. However, with the high explosion radius between 20 to 30 meters, now there is a question. How much of the explosion damage can penetrate through the hull of the ship according to the base penetration distance? So this is a thing that I want to test. Which type of the distortion weapon is more effective against a certain ship? Distortion cannon, distortion repeater, or the distortion scatterguns? Now let's go find out. The first test, we're gonna be using the FAC Lightnings. The FAC Lightning doesn't have any physicalized components, but we'll see how this will do. So first weapon, we're gonna be using the distortion repeaters. Now, my ship is going to be on the receiving end of these distortion repeaters. One thing that is very important is that for the distortion weapons, and obviously they will only do distortion damage. No physical damage, no laser damage, only distortion damage. However, for the shield of our ships, it will block the majority of the distortion damage, above 81% of them. So when enemy ship is hitting my ship with distortion weapons, you can see the distortion effect, but I'm not taking any distortion damage. And my shield is going down really slow. So in order for the distortion weapon to be effective, you will have to use lasers to take down the enemy ship's shield first. Now I'm using the laser cannons, which can take down shield a lot faster. For this test, I'm just gonna turn off my shield. Shield's offline. So shield is offline, and now I'm gonna be firing the distortion repeaters. Fire. Ooh, now you can see my distortion amount is going up really fast. 50, 57. If I keep firing the whole capacitor, wow, I think I fired only about 20 rounds, half of my capacitor. My ship is already disabled. And now it will take me less than half a minute to recover from the distortion. And after that, I will have to give power to all my components. But you can set a keybind for all this. So the distortion repeater is still quite effective. Now we're going to switch ship. Okay, same thing. The shield I turned off, so I'm gonna be on the receiving end of the distortion cannons. Fire. Oh, the distortion cannons, you can see a few hits. And my ship is down. So the cannons take down the ship a lot faster than the repeaters. So if I keep firing at it, I can give the power plant distortion 100% full. The next test will be the Distortion Scattergun. So this is a 325A, and I have one Salvation Distortion Scattergun in the front. So the shield is still down. I'm gonna fire the Distortion Scattergun at close range. Only one shot at the nose. Let's see. Fire. One shot. One shot, 14%. Fire from the back. 7%. Some of my bullets did not hit. So I'm gonna fire at really close range. So every bullet will hit the ship. That's 14%. So maximum, when every single bullet hits, it will give 14% distortion to my power plant. Okay, I'm gonna fire. Again, this is slower because of the rounds per minute is quite slow. But also because I have only one weapon.
Engines offline.
If I have two weapons, the ship can get shut down a lot faster. So according to this test, all three distortion weapons are quite effective at disabling the fighters. The distortion cannons is the fastest so far, and also depends on how many you are equipping with. If you fly a Guardian MX with 4 size 4 distortion scatterguns, and you can disable ships a lot faster, 4 times faster than the 325A. Alright, the next test, we're going to be using a bigger ship, the Perseus. And the Perseus has physicalized components. And then first weapon is distortion repeaters. First test, very important. I'm going to be shooting at different parts of the ship. Let's see if different parts will receive different distortion damage for the power plant or not. So first is I'm going to be shooting at the nose. Fire. Just a burst. Yep, if I shoot at the nose of the ship, I am not receiving any power plant distortion. And now I'm gonna shoot at the middle of the ship. There we go, I'm receiving some power plant distortion. 10%. Now, let it cool down. So, from nose, going up to the middle of the ship. Yep, middle of the ship. When it gets close to the power plant, I'm receiving some distortion. Okay, I'm gonna shoot at the back of the ship. Yeah, the back of the ship also has one power plant, so I'm receiving the distortion damage. So where you shoot at the ship does matter for the bigger ships. For the small fighters, it doesn't matter because the explosion radius from 20 to 30 meters, it will cover most of the areas. But for the bigger ships, you need to know where the power plants are at, and then you have to shoot at the power plant. So I'm gonna only shoot in the middle of the ship. So that is one power plant. I'm gonna distort it to 50%. That's it. So if I shoot only at the middle of the ship, the maximum distortion I will receive is 50%, which is one power plant. So in order to disable the Perseus, I will have to shoot both the middle and the rear side of the ship, because both power plants has to be disabled in order to disable the entire ship. And now my ship is disabled. Now the power plant is getting recovered, but I keep shooting in the middle of the ship. So one power plant is cooling down, but if I keep distorting the other power plant, oh, now you can see, if I only keep distorting one power plant, eventually my power plant will recover from one power plant, and I can still move the ship, even though the other power plant is getting distorted. So in order to disable the bigger ship, you have to keep both power plants distorted at all times. Otherwise, it will recover. However, for the Perseus, it's quite easy to do. So just shoot middle and the back, going back and forth, middle and back. Keep it distorted, especially with distortion repeaters. You have a lot of bullets in one capacitor, which can keep it distorted. Okay, the next test will be the distortion cannons. So again, distortion cannons, I'm going to be firing in the nose of the ship. Fire. The nose is getting hit, but no distortion damage. I'm going to move to the middle of the ship. The middle of the ship is taking distortion damage, yes. And each hit is 7%. And power plant is distorted. One power plant is distorted. So same thing, in order to distort the Perseus, even with the cannons, you have to distort both the middle and the rear side of the power plant. And now is disabled. And now is the distortion scattergun. So first I'm going to shoot at the nose. That's the same thing. The nose is getting hit, but no distortion damage. When I shoot in the middle of the ship, I'm taking 4% distortion damage each hit. Fire. Yeah, the maximum full burst is only 4%. Ooh, this is slower than the other two weapons. Now, another thing that is very important to know is that when one of the power plant is disabled on the Perseus, 49%, one more hit. Hit. So now, even though you still have one power plant, but one of the power plant has been shut down. Now, you only have half of the power supply. Radar and my life support has been shut down because of that. And my engine power being reduced to 2 pips. As soon as this power plant is recovered, I now have 14 pips to spare. I can give full power to weapon. So according to this test, first of all, regarding the explosion radius as well as the ammo penetration, I don't think the ammo penetration and the ammo penetration near and far radius matter much. Those values are not necessary at all. Distortion repeaters, distortion scattergun, as well as the distortion cannons, they are all very effective at penetrating into the power plant of the ship, especially the Perseus. It's a big ship. It has a pretty strong armor, but all 3 types of the distortion weapons can penetrate and do direct distortion damage to the power plant. And because of that, compared with these 3 weapons, I think the distortion repeater is actually better because of the charging speed is faster and you have more rounds in a capacitor. Even though it's a little bit slower at disabling ships compared with the distortion cannons. But it is a lot easier to use. You can keep a bigger ship distorted, for example the Perseus, by shooting at both areas of the power plant. And because of the ammo charging is faster and you have more rounds to shoot at, so it's easier to use. But of course, it also depends on what ship that you're equipping these weapons for, and especially for the distortion scatterguns. If you can equip 4 distortion scatterguns for the Guardian MX and have someone take down the shield for you, and then the distortion scattergun will have more powerful distortion effect, especially at disabling capital ships. So we're going to be testing that in another video. And this is it for this test. Thanks for watching. I will see you guys in the next one.